Welcome back to Benny's Custom Works, proudly supported by Valvoline and Sparesbox. Don't forget Benny5 on checkout. This week, something a little bit different. We've got the Falcon here behind me now. This is the last time you guys are going to see the Falcon on camera as my vehicle. It's official. I have sold the Ferrari Falcon. The new owner takes ownership of it next week. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed emotion today because we're basically going to go through the whole build from start to finish. We're going to be referencing a lot of previous videos that you guys may or may not have seen before. We're also going to have a full Falcon playlist as well, so that if you do want to go all the way back to the start, you can check out the whole build series. But we're going to dive in, talk about what I've done, why I've done it, and at the end of the video, we're also going to show you what I've replaced it with. One of the very first videos we did on the channel was the actual FGX front end upgrade. So for those of you that aren't actually aware, this hasn't always had this front end. This is a 2008 FG Mark 1 XR6 Turbo that was built by Ford in this configuration, but not with this front end. So this front is a hodgepodge of parts, predominantly actually from a New South Wales Highway Patrol car that was crashed in the rear end. The right-hand guard, the bonnet, the left-hand guard, the grills, and some of the other underpinnings are all from a police car. The front bar's actually recently been replaced again because I hit a road sign and that damaged the bar. That's the third front bar I've actually had on this car, but most of the other parts remain still from the police car. I think the headlights were from a separate car as well, because at the time when I did the front end conversion, the headlights were really hard to find. The whole car's actually been resprayed front to back in the factory color. Originally we were just going to paint bits and pieces, but by the end of it we went through and painted the whole car again. But yeah, I think it's come out pretty well, and we've kind of done heaps of stuff on the outside that a lot of people may or may not notice from the start. The Sprint guard badges, these aren't obviously part of the normal police car setup. Normally there's just an indicator on here, and generally when you delete the indicator from the guard, go to the mirrors. So we've also fitted some mirrors with the external indicator. These are aftermarket ones, but they were also factory fitted to G6Es and some other high grade Falcons, such as the Sprint, obviously. So yeah, they are available either genuine or aftermarket, and I just grabbed the aftermarket ones because they were reasonably priced. Yeah, we've got the canopy. That thing's been a pretty much a staple for me for a long time. I played around with 4 or 5 different setups on the back of this over the years, and going back to the canopy, I think it's the best compromise between an open ute and something that's pretty well watertight. I've had canopies on tons of cars, including the new car, which you're going to see, and for the reason is also it's pretty much a sealed box. You can throw stuff in there. You don't necessarily have to strap down every single item you're always going to put in there. And yeah, I think they work really well. Some people don't like the styling of them, but at the end of the day, this thing is a work ute. So yeah, I think the canopies really work well. Going back to the front of this thing, we've changed a lot of suspension, brakes, all sorts of stuff's been done in this thing over the years. Got Shockworks coilovers in the front. Got the Shockworks adjustable damper in the back. We've also got a ton of Super Pro arms that have gone in this thing. Basically just trying to upgrade and keep this thing fresh. Worth noting too, if you do have a late model Falcon, an FG or an FGX, you can't replace any of the ball joints in the arms. So if they do get wear, it is a full arm replacement deal. These things actually weren't too bad, but I didn't want to have a hodgepodge of new and used or new and high kilometer arms. This thing does have 240,000 kilometers on the chassis, but all of that stuff's pretty much been replaced now. We've also gone for a 6-piston upgrade with the Brembo brakes up front, and we've got the single piston PBR FPV style, same as Territory rear brakes on it. I did have 4 pots on the back at one point, but I had mixed reviews on the internet. Some people were saying you shouldn't run a fixed caliper with a solid axle rear end. In my experience, they worked fine, but at the end of the day, they're actually worth quite a lot of money. So I ended up selling the rear setup off and just going with the PBR rears. Now, the most obvious thing that doesn't belong on this car is the Ferrari wheels. They are from a 488 GTB. They were basically just a Yahoo auction find. I was looking for some 20s. Originally, I had R35 GTR wheels on this, which is also probably not really a wheel you'd expect on a Falcon. But I was looking on Yahoo. I basically just searched by stud pattern and size. So there are a 20 by 9.5 on the front and a 20 by 11 on the back. And I think they actually suit the car really well. The offsets on Ferraris are quite high, so we do have spacers all around on that. The other reason I've used spacers is so that we didn't have to modify the center bore of the wheel. The spacers are hub-centric to both the wheel and the car, so zero alignment issues there. And we've also got long high tensile studs in the spacer to suit the very thick Ferrari hub flange. We'll cruise around the back. The most important part of a work ute is the shin basher. This thing gets a workout. The tow bar on any ute I think is a massive asset. The Falcon over the years has towed pretty much all of my on-camera cars as well as a lot of random stuff pretty much around the country. This thing's been to Queensland, Victoria, obviously New South Wales where we are. Yeah, I've racked up tons of Ks over the years and it's been a fantastic tow car as well as just a daily work ute. But yeah, highly recommend for anyone that's got a vehicle that can tow to get a tow bar. You may not use it a lot, but you really notice that when you do have the option that it opens up a lot of opportunity and you can start to do stuff yourself. You don't have to pay for tows or sort of rely on other people as much. The tow bar for me is probably the most versatile part of this vehicle. I highly recommend a tow bar for anyone that wants to tow and add a little bit of flexibility to their fleet. Now, something that I don't think we ever actually touched on camera, but it's in my opinion, probably one of the biggest letdowns of a factory XR6 turbo is the rear diff. The M86 diff, in theory was a good thing, but the LSD just let it down. This car was no exception. I've actually had 2 or 3 diffs in this thing over the years. The diff that's in it now is an FGX XR6 turbo housing. However, we've actually got a genuine Eaton True Track in it, new gear set and new seals and bearings. We did that about 5,000 Ks ago, give or take. So yeah, the whole thing's had to freshen up. Also put new King lowered leaf springs in the back. A lot of people reset the originals, but I really wanted to kind of keep with the theme of replacing everything rather than trying to modify it or tweak it. And I think that the King stuff went in pretty easily. It was a direct fit. And also the ride height's really good. I didn't want to run it too low because obviously it's still a tow vehicle. The one downside with running the lowered leaf in the back is we did have to remove the airbags just because there wasn't enough clearance in there. Considering these leaves are effectively a lowered spring, they still handle towing quite well, and they don't particularly bottom out badly. And yeah, even with a Cresta or one of our other cars on the trailer, it still towed fine. Same with the Lexus, even with the tray full of drift wheels. So yeah, I think that those leaves are actually a really good setup. And some guys kind of pull packs apart and take springs out to get it lower. Effectively reducing the rate of that spring as well. So I think the King springs are a good compromise because they still maintain the original rate, but give you a lower ride height. So I think those things are a pretty good option for Falcons. Into the powerhouse. So a lot's changed in here over the years. This was, obviously I've mentioned a couple of times, it is a factory XR6 turbo car, but this is not the original engine. This is an FG Mark II XR6 turbo engine, and we've given this thing a pretty good freshen up top to bottom. The only thing we didn't touch was effectively piston rods and bottom end bearings. The cylinder head's had a complete freshen up, and it's also got Crow valve springs in it. Still the stock cams. I've got an Empire timing chain set in it, Boundary oil pump and gears that are also in it. Actually, the main reason is the Empire gear is because it wasn't available at the time. But yeah, I've used a few of those Empire gear sets now since building this car. Got a full Process West step cooler kit in it. That's probably one of the most impressive bolt-on kits that I've actually ever used. There's zero cutting, 0 holes. It comes with a lot of brackets to relocate OEM parts rather than bending and destroying and damaging stuff. Also, speaking of really good quality bolt-on stuff, the Manta exhaust system that we put on this as well, much in a similar vein to the Process West stuff. A truly bolt-on system, no issues, no cutting of anything. The clearance is really nice. It still runs a twin, I think it's 2 3/4 twin rear section, so you don't have a single 4-inch pipe hanging really low under the car. And the sound of it's really good. It doesn't drone. Even with the canopy, I thought for sure it'd drone. So it has a really nice note when you're on power. When you're kind of cruising around town, it's super subtle and it's very livable day to day as a work vehicle. We've also got plenty of other stuff going on in here. We've got a high-flow 3576 with a billet wheel that's been put into it, effectively making it a 3584. Obviously, it's a factory cast housing, still the factory Ford componentry, so visually it looks like a factory turbo. The goal in the bay was to pretty much keep it original looking as possible. I've also got a Street Fighter intake, which is effectively a copy of the factory FPV intake, and although this is currently open, when the bonnet's closed it fully seals it off, so these things are completely legal. Also worth mentioning while we're in here, the Haltech Elite Pro plug-in. This was actually a test vehicle for Haltech before it was released, and this was the test car for the FG Mark 1 Ute platform. We spent a lot of time tweaking things in the ECU, and as well in the background, making things like the fuel economy and the range work correctly on the dash. Haltech spent tons and tons and tons of time playing with that, and yeah, it was really cool to be part of that sort of R&D and test phase and see how they work, or how many hours and how many changes they actually put in to the ECU. This ECU had pretty much different firmware every week for about 5 months. We were changing something, and the guys would jump in remotely and play around with it. And yeah, it was fantastic to see just how much time and effort and dedication they really did put into developing that Elite Pro plugin. In the captain's chair, although this looks like a pretty much original interior, 95% of this has been changed. Pretty much the only original part from the factory car interior is the dashboard and the carpet. The door trims have been changed. They're G6E, as are the door handles. All the dash spears have been replaced with XR6 or XR50 spears, so they're like a faux carbon look. Factory, these would have been all just this flat silver, the same as the head unit. New shifter boot, new handbrake boot. The seats we retrimmed in a previous episode as well, so these are factory XR6 FGX or factory FGX XR series seat trims. We also replaced the lower seat on the driver, the lower seat foam on the driver's side, and the side trim. They're all really common to break. We've also got the FGX floor mats and FGX headliner. The FG Mark 1 and Mark 2 non-FGX models, this was all a tan color, and in my opinion it was probably the biggest letdown of the whole interior. The interiors in these are pretty nice in my opinion, and yeah, having that sort of tan brown headliner when everything else was black, it really didn't make a lot of sense. And being that I'm not necessarily the cleanest person day in, day out, getting in and out of cars dirty, there was a sort of stain on the headliner here, and the pillar trims are marked from getting in and out as well. So yeah, I think that making the whole interior black has yeah, definitely changed the look of the car and made it a bit more modern. I've also got an FG Mark II ICC in the car now, so much better Bluetooth connectivity, full music streaming as well, whereas the Mark 1 doesn't do music streaming, and also the phone call quality is much better with the Mark II screen. The biggest downside with the Mark II is the screen itself. The screen unit fails a lot. Pretty much one of the last things we did was change the steering wheel. We've now gone to a later, I think it was probably out of an FPV originally, having all of the silver buttons instead of the black buttons, but we still just got the standard Ford airbag, not the FPV one. That's pretty much it for the Falcon tour, so I think we might take it for a bit of a lap. This is it. This is my 2022 Ram Express 1500. For those of you in America, you'll recognize this as a DS model, which has been available in the US for some time. Now it's been replaced by the DT. We do actually get the DS and the DT here in Australia. However, the DS Express 1500 is much cheaper. Now this thing is about 110 on road in Australia. It's a lot of money. There's no escaping that. But it's pretty much ticked all the boxes for me. The tray space is by volume larger than the Falcon. Still got a canopy, which I've already mentioned. But the big bonus and the big winner for me is we've now got 5 seats. So we can actually take all the crew in one vehicle if we do events, rather than taking multiple vehicles. Still got, like I said, the same amount of tray space. And interestingly, this actually has 6 seats. However, during the conversion at Walkinshaw, they locked the 6th seat out. I am currently investigating re-enabling that. I believe the reason it's locked out is for basically a marketing reason for the crash rating in Australia, because the center seat obviously won't have an airbag in the front row. So you've got a standard driver and a passenger airbag. So in the crash rating here, I believe all the front row seats have to have an airbag. All things aside, the middle seat would be rarely used. However, I think it is a handy part of the vehicle and something that we should add. It's pretty well standard. The only thing I have done is a catback exhaust and added the canopy obviously, and the DS Express doesn't come with leather, so I did actually get the dealership to get a leather retrim on the interior before I collected it. Pretty happy with this thing so far. I've actually done 2,000 Ks in it already. As you can see, it's pretty dirty. Definitely hasn't had a clean yet. So I do want to clean the thing pretty soon. Still getting used to it a little bit. It is much larger than the Falcon, but it's not as large as you think. I can take this down to the shops and park it in any car park, no problem. So yeah, there's a lot of people pushing back about these things, the F-150s and the Silverados being in Australia. But in my opinion, the 1500 capacity size is still perfectly livable. The 2500 and the 3500s, a little bit of a different story. But yeah, these things I think definitely have a future in Australia, and they're pretty tough rig, and it is a proper work truck. It's not a car or a light vehicle off-roader or a typical dual cab. Like, this thing will tow 4.5 tons. I don't think I'm gonna actually ever tow 4.5 tons with it, but knowing that I can if I need to, it's yeah, a pretty handy thing, and it does open up options if I do want to build a different trailer, a larger trailer, or potentially an enclosed trailer later on. We're gonna go off-road, who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen? Well, that pretty much wraps us up for this episode. There's a massive list of people that I do need to thank for their support with the Falcon. First and foremost, Haltech, and also Scotty for continually muck around with that thing. From the very start, it's been a pretty cool journey with the Haltech in that car. Thanks to Omar and the team at Empire Mechanical and Racing. Also thanks to Rod at Empire Performance Parts. Thanks to the guys at Sparesbox also. There's a lot of parts that went into that car from Sparesbox, so I really appreciate their support. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.